want to cover.
Let's just make sure as well to give a brief explanation of what Capoeira itself is at the beginning, because our listeners aren't going to be as knowledgeable about that.
Hey, yeah, it's pajama dance party. We got it.
Evan has 3 sentences to describe Capoeira. So
Perfect.
Good luck.
All right, and then you guys have 3 sentences to describe.
Yes.
Okay. Woo! I've got my elevator pitch ready to go. This is what I've been preparing for my whole life.
Welcome to Only the Strongest, a very special episode of Only the Strongest that actually is also an episode of the podcast For the Love of Language. The Capoeira side of people here. We are Varal, Bonzinho, and Azul. We'll introduce ourselves a little bit more in a moment. Stacy and EJ, could you guys introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your podcast, what y'all do?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Stacy. I'm a linguist. I'm working on my graduate degree in linguistics. And EJ can tell a little bit more about themselves.
Yeah, my name is EJ, and I have a bachelor's in linguistics, master's in world languages. I'm actually a software engineer, and I love Capoeira, and our For the Love of Language podcast is just about all things language.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, thank you both very much for being here, and big thanks to Azul, who's kind of the linking point.
Yes.
Stacy's one of
They both were.
Azul's students.
Yeah, they're
from
both
way back.
some of my students
were
from
they
my
both?
previous studio in Utah. They are fierces to be reckoned with, both in and out of the Hada, everybody.
Fierces
so
or
watch out.
We
Fierce
love
forces.
training with us.
Fearful forces.
Fierceful forces. Forceful fierces? I don't know. I'm not the linguist here, all right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Look,
That's
I
kind
like
of funny
it
because
both.
I was talking to Sarah before we got started and explaining this, and she was like, "Wait, they're both linguists and they were both Azul's students."
Yeah.
I was like, "Yeah." She was like, "That seems very
It was.
I mean, when
You're right.
we
Maybe just one of them.
when EJ and I first met, we clicked immediately. Like when we found out that we were kind of doing the same thing, we were like, "Oh my god, hey, we're like the same right now."
Yep.
So it was really interesting, but I do think that EJ has a leg up on me in terms of how long they've been doing Capoeira.
No, but all I just
by a couple
bring
months.
people together. What can I say?
Yes.
It's so true.
Yep.
It's what we always say about you.
For better or worse.
Azul. You're like the campfire of this podcast. It just huddles around. Actually, speaking of this podcast, so we're going to talk a little bit about good, helpful ways to start learning a language. Obviously, is very, very germane to Capoeiristas trying to pick up some Portuguese. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the music in Capoeira and the songs being in Portuguese and what happens if the songs are no longer in Portuguese, that kind of thing. But first, since this is the crossover podcast, we're going to do some double introductions. So on our side here, the Only the Strongest side, we are a Capoeira podcast. We talk about Capoeira, which is a Brazilian thing, Brazilian art form, has a bunch of elements, dance, martial arts, music,
Folklore.
language, culture. If you want to learn about it, if you're curious, I recommend A, Bob's Burgers, and B, YouTube. And I really think
You'll have a handle on it.
that's about as much education
And also
as you could
listen to
possibly
Only
need.
the Strongest.
Yeah, there you go.
It's a very good
That's right.
podcast.
Possibly. Can you tell us a little bit about what the heck is linguistics?
Linguistics
No one
is
knows.
the study of language and all the pieces that go into it. So the sounds, the way that parts of words connect, word order, different languages, just everything around language.
Yeah, and contrary to popular belief, it is not inherently the study of multiple languages, so not every linguist speaks a million languages, and not every person who speaks a million languages is a linguist. So, just getting that right out of there. Of us two, EJ is the polyglot, the person who speaks all the languages, and I am the formal linguist, the person who needs to really work on learning all those languages, but knows a lot about the structure of languages across the world.
Wait, EJ, how many languages
Well, I
do you
grew
know?
up moving to a different country every 2 years because of my dad's job. So I've studied a lot of them. I really try and keep up Russian and Spanish, and obviously I use Portuguese with capoeira.
Nice.
Man, Russian.
I
sounds
enjoy it.
cool. That's awesome.
Neat.
Wow. Well, I kind of wish we were a Russian martial art podcast now.
Some Sistema in the house. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some Krav Maga going on.
Okay. Well, if everyone's ready, we can move into the meat
do
of
it.
the podcast here.
Yeah.
Does that sound good? Okay. Well, loosely speaking, no one in America has an easy time picking up Portuguese. The people who seem to do well are, in my experience, are the Spanish speakers either seem to do really, really well or really poorly because they hate it because it's not like Spanish.
Yes.
But just in general, like no one understands Portuguese. No one knows that Brazil speaks a different language. So we are really interested to hear on some thoughts you both have on ways of picking up Portuguese a little bit easier, the music in capoeira, that kind of thing.
So just to give a little bit more info about EJ and I as well, we both have experience teaching either English as an additional language or teaching Russian. So we do have experience not only being in capoeira and working with Portuguese, but like language pedagogy. And we plan on having an episode about that later. But I think the most important thing to learning any language, and it doesn't really matter how you learn it, whether it's in the roda, in that group setting where you're playing capoeira and you're singing with everybody, or if you're planning on taking formal Portuguese classes, the biggest thing is motivation. And I'm sure our wonderful capoeirista athletes here could attest to that motivation will get you really, really far. Just like any skill, I like to compare learning a language to like learning the piano. There are some people who are so just naturally good at it. They can sit down at the piano at like 3 years old and play a symphony, and they're just amazing. But there's others who really have to work on it. But that doesn't mean it's not possible. So I think the first tip is to really find what your motivation is, whether that is to like write your own song for capoeira, whether that's to be able to like communicate effectively with like a mestre from Brazil. Like find a goal, find a motivation, find a reason, and that's going to help you in your language learning journey. So having a goal in mind is definitely a good place to start, especially if you're like just bottom of the barrel starting out.
Definitely. And once you have that goal, once you have that motivation, then the things that are actually going to help you be successful in learning a language is having authentic input. So listening to as much Portuguese as you can, if that's YouTube videos, if you're able to meet some Brazilians, however you're able to get that authentic input, or also reading. If you can find any Portuguese books or websites, there's a ton of content out there on the internet. You just need to look for it. So input is definitely a huge thing. And then also interaction, I would say, is another massive one. So if you want to be really good at speaking in a language, you have to actually practice speaking. A lot of people, especially adults, when they're learning a language, are afraid to speak. They're afraid to make the mistakes. They're afraid to put themselves out there. And then that ends up actually holding them back, because it's by practicing and by speaking that you'll actually improve that specific skill.
Almost like learning music in capoeira and being scared to sing in front of other people as an adult.
I feel personally attacked. From both of you guys.
Yeah. I mean, like going back to the metaphor about language being well, especially an additional language, a language being a skill, like language learning being a skill. You know, a lot of teachers out there who are teaching any sort of instrument, they want you to like be able to perform to some degree, or not be scared of like showing your skills in public, because it's in those terrifying moments that you really kind of solidify some of the skills that you've built over time.
Right, so you just got to look like an idiot like you do in capoeira.
Exactly.
I mean, that's
fall down a couple of
That's super
times,
similar.
conjugate something
I
wrong.
do have to say, in my experience, nobody has been anything but happy, impressed, or grateful when I try to speak their language. You know, and they may switch back to English and they speak both, like if I try and speak Portuguese to them, but that's usually like better than nothing. Or, you know, they may help you a little bit with like a grammar issue, but nobody's like laughing at you or anything like that.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, like, people are generally good, I like to think anyway, and especially if you are putting in an effort to, like, make a connection with that person, I feel like they're gonna see it and will be willing to, like, help and support you and be patient.
Yeah, I think that's really similar to Capoeira in that sense. Like, I know there's always, you know, new students who, you know, they think they got it. They're like, oh yeah, I can do the sequence you taught in class. That's fine. And then you throw them in the roda and they always freeze up. And they always say afterwards, I don't know what happened in there. And I'm just like, yeah, well, everybody, you know, you have to learn that, you know, that's going at the realistic pace that, you know, that's where you actually pick up the capoeira.
And
it's
your
not
brain
the
does
sequences.
melt
It's not
with
just knowing
language
the
like that
movements.
too.
It's being able to apply them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
And in the
similar.
same way, people are always
I'm-
very, like, if somebody freezes up in the roda, nobody's going to, like, stop and laugh at you in the same way that they're not going to stop and
Yeah.
laugh if you try and speak a language. But it's those mental barriers to get over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do some before we totally wrap this up. Let's do like one or two quick last minute thoughts. If you guys have anything on things students can do, I know that like EJ especially, you said that learning a language you could spend an entire episode on, and we're unfairly confining you down to like a quick 6 minutes. But do you have one or two last minute thoughts here
I
before we
think
move on?
probably the main thing that people think of when they think of learning a language is like Duolingo or language learning apps. And I would say there is a lot that you can get from those language learning apps, but the more actual authentic input that you can get in context, so if it's like a story, if it's a full conversation, that's going to help you a lot more than a lot of the like isolated phrases that you get in apps. And even Duolingo has a lot of podcasts at this point in different languages to help with having that more cohesive input. But especially if you are really relying on language learning apps, you might need to go out of your way to get the interaction and to practice the actual speaking.
Mm-hmm. And I will just kind of like tack on as like a last minute thing here too, that those who play capoeira have a serious advantage when it comes to like language learning. Being encouraged to use the language actively, even if you like make mistakes, having tons of content. You know, there's YouTube videos of like mestres talking about stuff and people teaching songs, and there's a lot of opportunities to get that authentic input like EJ was talking about, and to get a lot of practice in as well. So it's really advantageous in terms of like a good learning environment for those who are in capoeira or those who want to learn
Well, and
Portuguese.
songs in general are just really a fantastic medium because you get a lot of repetition and people are like singing very, very clearly. And so, yeah, like capoeira songs are fantastic.
I was going to say that we sublease our space from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu people, and they don't use any Portuguese, and from day one have like commented on how much we use it in our classes and how much we use it just chatting or silly like phrases we're saying to each other as we're training, or the songs on top of that. Like it really is a lot of language in capoeira specifically compared to I think any other martial art, and I think it is because of the songs for sure.
Yeah.
I think
There are like the occasional jiu-jitsu move will have a Portuguese name, but it's very minor compared to capoeira. Like kung fu, you'll frequently see like movement names or kicks. They'll call the names in like Chinese, and like iaido, like the Japanese sword martial art, you'll get a bunch of Japanese phrases and stuff as well. But I haven't seen any martial arts that do like a language and a culture as much as capoeira does.
Yeah.
I
Plus
think-
one for capoeira.
Yeah, the big benefit I think to learning through song is like the pronunciation of a lot of the words comes more naturally. Like for me, I didn't really pursue Portuguese at all for probably like 8 years in Capoeira until I was like mid-college time frame, and because I started a bit younger. But when I started taking classes, I feel like I advanced quicker because I was able to I knew the pronunciation of words, even though I didn't necessarily know like the grammar and how everything fit together for the most part. But it's a huge like
having like a rhyming
I can definitely recognize like what a word was because it was either had some intonation here or there, and it was different from how a normal English speaker would say it. So
having those rhyming schemes is like really good. Then you can like lean on those, being like, this word rhymes with this word, even though it's spelled differently. And there's definitely an advantage to seeing people say it. We could do another whole episode about visual learning, but visually seeing people pronounce words also helps to enhance your learning of the language as well.
There were big concerns actually about all the masking during COVID and if that would impact like child's first language acquisition.
Yeah, both my kids have speech delays actually, and a lot of other kids I know at this point. I've spoken to our speech therapist, and it's like an epidemic itself. There's so many children with speech delays right now.
Oh my god!
So it really did. That not only did they not get any socialization, they also did not see the speech as much, and they're just super delayed, like a lot of kids. So firsthand experience there.
Wow.
You guys talking about the songs brought me to another topic I wanted to talk about really quick. In Capoeira, everything. I mean, even the origins, stories, and most of the information that we have about Capoeira came through oral history. And this oral history, for your listeners that don't understand, the short long of it is during the Portuguese slave trade, when people were brought from Africa and made slaves in Brazil, obviously they were forced to learn Portuguese, and Portuguese became the language that they adopted. But some of their ideas, religions, maybe art forms, obviously were coming from where they were from, and there was kind of this blend of those ideas. Currently, the songs are still in Portuguese, and I guess my question is, how is language both affecting the culture of them through this slave trade and having to mask or adopt kind of like their, you know what I mean? Like this kind of draws back to colonial roots and like, is Portuguese where Capoeira should be spoken? Some people have staunchly said that Portuguese now is Capoeira, and when you start singing songs that aren't in Portuguese, it's no longer Capoeira, it's no longer Brazilian. And maybe some could argue, well, that's, if we go even further back, the 1619 of Brazil. If you go further back, maybe that's, for the best anyway. We've had a lot of people argue that some places around the world have started writing Capoeira songs not in Portuguese, but in their native languages that they sing in their rodas. And is that controversial or not? And how is that going to affect Capoeira in the future? Is it best for the sport to keep it in Portuguese always and try and draw from those roots that are, more or less settled in Brazil? Or is this an okay expansion? What are your guys' thoughts as capoeiristas on singing songs not in Portuguese, and also just that really wrought history and oral history, and like how that was affected in adopting Portuguese in the first place and singing everything in Portuguese, and Capoeira is Brazil and is Portuguese?
Wow.
There's a lot there.
Huge question.
There is a lot. If you don't mind, I'll kind of kick it off with some of the first points that you mentioned. So the first point being about Portuguese being a colonizer language, which I think is something that definitely needs to be addressed. And the spread of languages brought around by colonizers is something we see all over the world: Spanish, English, Portuguese, Dutch. It's French. It's all over the place. There's a lot of study in like formal linguistics about kind of how this happens and kind of how it affects different societies, and it varies. So to kind of do a quick comparison, we can talk about English briefly. English is another one of those big colonizer languages, but in countries like India, which was like a heavily colonized place, they adopted English to an extent, right? They were able to maintain some of their original culture enough to where English and Hindi or whatever other language, because there's hundreds of languages in India, they could create a blend of their own variety of English and make it their own unique thing. And in that way, they've freed English from being a colonizer specific language. They've, taken it and embraced it as their own and have flavored it in their own way. Unfortunately, Brazil was one of those countries that didn't necessarily have that option because there was a stronger power dynamic. Like India was really complicated with a caste system on top of colonizers and all of this chaos. But the slaves that came over to Brazil didn't necessarily get a chance to maintain their languages from the wonderful places that they came from. And so it was basically beaten out of them. So saying that it's like a colonizer language is like very true. But it seems as though, and this is just my interaction with students from Brazil, with other friends and capoeiristas from Brazil, it seems that a lot of people have just taken it on and made it their own. It's no longer Portugal's Portuguese, it's Brazilian Portuguese, and they've made it their own. And in doing so, it has also blended with indigenous languages, and they've kind of, it's completely different. So I think that's my first point that I want to make, is that it is different, it is unique, and it does seem to be like a symbol, not necessarily of colonization anymore, but of like the uniqueness of Brazil.
If I could add to that really quickly, like I also think if you think about, it being problematic that we're using Portuguese with capoeira, it's not really possible to go back to maybe the original African languages. Because if you think about those individuals that were brought over and enslaved, brought from Africa, like their children's children probably no longer speak their ancestral languages most of the time. And so if you said, oh, we're gonna, in a kind of dictatorial type way, we're gonna say, we can no longer use Portuguese with capoeira, we want to go back to the true African roots, you're actually gonna be harming the children of those Africans that were brought over just as much as everyone else. Like there is no real way at this point to reclaim it farther than Portuguese. I think like we can celebrate the African influence in Brazilian Portuguese and in the capoeira songs, but I think going back farther than just Portuguese just doesn't really make sense, and there would be no way to enforce it, no way to do that. And I think just a little bit, diving into a different part of your question, like, is it problematic for people to be using other languages now other than Portuguese? This gets into a different aspect of capoeira. Like, a lot of it is culture, and learning songs and learning about Brazil is frequently a part of the martial art. Like, a lot of people will make trips to Brazil and like love having that be a part of their experience. But at the same point, I personally don't think that you should mandate like everybody has to learn a language for several reasons. Like, not everybody can. It's not as accessible. You can make it a lot easier for a lot more people to access it if they're able to train in their own languages. And I love Portuguese. I lived in Brazil for a couple of years in elementary school, and it was my first non-English language. But I do think there are some advantages to allowing people to use their own languages and bring that into the art.
Yeah. And I kind of want to tap into that because Varal mentioned, I don't know if we caught this on recording, mentioned that, maybe in Japan they're using Japanese for songs instead. And that sparks into mind that cultures and languages around the world have very different values when it comes to language borrowing. So to educate just a little bit, language borrowing is where, one language comes in contact with another, and the languages will kind of like share words, or kind of, I hate to say appropriate, but they will take some of the words and incorporate them into the language. So this happened with English. We've got a lot of French words.
Baguette?
We've got a lot of Latin words.
Anyone?
Right?
That's the first one you
and
think of.
But even think about it, like taco, burrito,
man.
we've got a bunch of them, especially like food names. And we also kind of, enforce like our own English pronunciation on some of those words. And so we don't see that as super problematic. I mean, of course, everyone's going to have like their own opinion, but over time, those get just kind of baked into the language. And similarly, Japan is very, very open to like incorporating external languages or external words into their vocabulary, and they'll just kind of squish them in and make it a part of the language. And so I'm not surprised that this is happening, because there are some cultures out there that are very open to like introducing new things to their own language. So they might kind of be giving and taking and kind of putting their own spin on it. But there are also cultures out there who are a little bit like less excited about borrowing and about the purity of their language and how they want to keep it a certain way. And so to some extent, it's I feel like it isn't inherently my place or like other linguists' place to necessarily judge that, because it can also be just like a culturally relative thing.
Well, and
like
I would also say linguists generally tend to be descriptivists rather than prescriptivists, which means that linguists are usually observing and describing what is happening rather than saying that language should happen a certain way. And so you'll find that linguists aren't usually editors. They're not usually the people saying, oh, you need that period, or oh, you need to say it this way. They're more going to be like, oh, that's an interesting variation.
And
I
just want to jump in and I feel like this is a general analogy. I am enthralled with everything you guys are saying. I feel like this is the same analogy of just kind of, there are people that believe things should never change, and there's people that embrace change and understand that that's the way of the world, and the world will wipe humans off the face of the earth one day because it continually changes, right? Like, we'll all die in a blaze eventually with global warming. But I think that you're right in some facets. Like, it's not necessarily a bad thing. A lot of people adopt other languages, other cultures, other ideas because they love them, because it adds to their lives, rather than delineating and calling everything an appropriation or everything this is how it's supposed to be done and everything else is heresy, and I think the more that capoeira grows, the more it's going to be accepted that it is a little bit different in different places. Like, if you take karate or some of the others like jiu-jitsu, for example, no one is going to go to a karate practitioner and say, like, oh, you're not Japanese or you don't speak Japanese, therefore I'm not going to study karate from you. But for some reason, there's still a little bit more of this idea that, like, true capoeirista must speak Portuguese, must come from Brazil, be able to, trace things back. And, different martial arts and cultures define themselves in different ways, and you will probably always have some capoeiristas that are the purists and want to stick with the tradition. But I think the bigger it gets, the more you will see these variations.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
Can I say something about that here? On the one, going back to the whole prescriptivist and descriptivist thing. I know you guys weren't saying it, but it's the people are the prescriptivists. It's the French. You just call them.
The
French
don't
don't want
worry,
anybody
we call
messing
them
with
out
their
all
language.
the time. All the time. They're notorious.
They don't appreciate
They're
it.
notorious.
Yeah. But I happen to be a little bit
You're
on
French?
that side myself, my sympathies on kind of the language should be a certain way as opposed to correct usage is defined sort of by
Yeah, but you're an uppity
democratic
writer.
consensus
yeah.
rather than top down. Yeah. But
I mean, everyone
But
is
with
entitled to their own
Capoeira-
opinions, and I mean, like a linguist is coming from a very different place than like a writer is, and so it's more of just like, you know, EJ and I have a unique background that has a very unique perspective, but there is definitely something to be said about tradition and a sort of maintenance. And I think that there should be a balance in any and every culture of innovation and tradition, because, you know, everything is going to change in the end, but having those elements of tradition is very important. And that's something that I admire capoeira for, is some of the tradition that goes into it. Yes, it's innovative. Yes, it can change and it's beautiful, but it also has a very rich history that I don't think should be completely like undermined or overseen.
You're anticipating exactly where I was going since we were talking earlier about jiu-jitsu schools not really using much Portuguese and saying, well, you know, if you train capoeira, you have a leg up to learn this other language. But if that becomes sort of the common standard is, you know, we're going to write songs in our native languages rather than Portuguese, to me, it seems like something is lost there. And every person who's picking up Portuguese and picking up more Brazilian culture becomes part of a like a chain of custody as things are getting passed down, since capoeira is still a little bit reliant on the oral tradition.
Yeah, definitely.
And if we just kind of say, yeah, you could do whatever you please with these songs. If I were dictator of capoeira, I would keep it all in Portuguese. I know obviously that's just simply not possible, and the world will move on and change. But I'm just curious, would you feel like, let's say you walked into a capoeira studio in Montreal and everybody was singing songs in, you know, Canadian French. Would you feel like, man, this is weird?
Well, I mean,
weird ass capoeira?
I would feel like it was,
yeah,
I would feel a little bit uncomfortable just because I wouldn't quite know what was going on, even though I do speak French. But like, there's definitely two extremes where you can go with this, right? There's definitely the, like, we keep everything in Portuguese all the time, always, or everything gets changed all the time, always. And I think a happy medium can definitely be achieved, and probably should be achieved, in order to pay proper homage to all of the wonderful and beautiful capoeiristas that came before. So I would, like, if I went to a studio in Montreal and it was mostly like, you know, they did the sequences and, you know, the initial stuff in French, and then they had, you know, the roda in Portuguese, and then maybe they tossed in like one French song there too. I think that would be more than okay for me personally. But again, that is something that's kind of subjective and is a bit on a spectrum, in my opinion.
There is something really cool about being able to go to a capoeira roda anywhere and being able to know the songs, because in some ways Portuguese is the universal language of capoeira, and people have tried to, you know, conquer the world and make one language a truly universal language in all sorts of contexts. But in capoeira, you know, Portuguese is still that language, and that does in some ways aid communication and making people feel comfortable. But at the same point, even now, if you go to any capoeira studio in the US, chances are that the class itself is still taught in English, even though some of the movement names are going to be in Portuguese. And that's already a compromise when you're thinking about it, right? Like, you're not only speaking Portuguese, most likely, when you're teaching capoeira, even if you're keeping those names. And so that's just one stage of, this being able to spread it. So, like, I think it's really cool to be able to spread the art in a bunch of different ways. And I do think that you'll get a lot more songwriting and a lot more creativity if you allow for other languages, because even someone who's like a fantastic poet, songwriter in their own language, even if they learn Portuguese really, really well, they might not feel comfortable writing songs in Portuguese. And I think we should always, cherish the traditional songs and the stories that they tell. Like, I think it would be a lot more difficult for a lot of people now to write songs about slavery and about the experience of those, first capoeiristas. And so those should definitely be preserved and cherished. But I also don't necessarily see an issue with adding in some modern ones.
Yeah, I think
like the Happy Birthday song in English.
Right.
People do that all the time. I don't like
point.
it. But...
Excellent point.
Go ahead, Bonzia.
Azul's favorite capoeira song.
Yeah, I think you bring up some good points there, and I was thinking this a while back that I kind of disagree with you, Evan, on this, on being the Portuguese absolutist in capoeira. That there already is that breakdown a little bit in the language the class is taught in, for the most part. Yes, the movements are still kind of in the Portuguese language in most places in the U.S., but it's taught in English. But I think what matters most with the songs, at least to me, what kind of is the essence of capoeira and what kind of makes it feel like the lifeblood of like the roda is like the content of what you're singing about and like the motifs of what it's about. So in that sense, I think that could be done in any language if that's like their form of expression with it. I don't think there should be any loss of the Portuguese side of it, and I think that should still be kind of a revered, like, traditional aspect. But I don't see an issue with a few songs and more like, maybe, closed group songs about their own experience that relate to capoeira being in their own language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I realize this is a slippery slope.
It's going to be all... you can bring something in as long as the theme is true to the soul of capoeira. And next thing you know, it's going to be capoeira held in yoga classes. And
he said the Y word.
Everybody's going to be, you're going to see it on late night TV.
I'm going to throw a...
I mean, it's already, but like people in Cirque du Soleil do it. So
Yeah, capoeira has found a space, like, with a lot of gymnasts and other martial artists pulling in little bits and pieces here and there. I do think that's one of the beautiful things about capoeira, though. Like, people come to it for all sorts of different reasons, and for some people it's purely the acrobatics. For other people it's like a relatively friendly fight. For other people it's the music. And I don't think you should necessarily turn people away just because they're not interested in the music and culture, at least to begin with. Now, to like really move up in capoeira, you should know the history, you should learn at least something. But again, I don't think it's fair to tell people you need to be a basically native Portuguese speaker in order to succeed at whatever that means for you.
And there is the crux, because how true to the roots can you remain when you veer away in language, right? Language and communication is like life and how people are expressing it. So I'm with Evan here, if I'm throwing my hat in the ring, and that I think it needs to stay 95% Portuguese because of those roots, because of the culture, because I don't think capoeira can or should ever be a martial art that is separated from its distraught and beautiful history. And the way to do that is going to be, don't bring that 5% up. I just think it's going to be language. I mean, if we could do capoeira songs in English, do you know how many stupid joke songs would be out there right now in English with all of us idiots that are in college learning capoeira thinking we're funny? And how, like, the language barrier cuts so many of those bad ideas out right from the
And it also probably cuts out a lot of really good ideas.
Potentially, but I feel like if somebody's going to share this with somebody else, they must first like completely immerse themselves and understand where it came from. And if you don't have an appreciation for you know, where it came from, which is going to be the culture and the language. How can you thoroughly express it to somebody else or relay that to somebody else? Does that make sense?
As as someone who's lived in Brazil and who loves Portuguese and language, I love the Portuguese aspect of capoeira, and I would personally love for it to still remain a huge part of capoeira and to make sure that we do keep all of the songs and stuff. But also, as a linguist, I don't think it's a fair expectation for everyone. Like, not everyone is going to be able to dedicate that many hours and that much of their life to capoeira when, you know, maybe they can still really enjoy it and contribute to it, but like asking someone to truly learn a foreign language is a big ask.
Yeah, it is.
You're just not cut out for capoeira then, EJ. Just kidding.
Oh, burn!
Way to cut.
I said,
ouch, right in my heart.
no, you're absolutely right. It is very difficult. So there's no argument there.
Yeah. I want to throw in one last linguistic fact. This isn't necessarily opinion. This is just kind of based on where the conversation has been. Just like a fact, a truth among linguistics and about language and language change. The songs that we sing today, the moves that we call out in classes, the Portuguese that is used by contemporary Brazilian mestres is already worlds different from what it originally was, because language always is changing. The language of Brazil and Brazilian Portuguese is nothing like it was 100 years ago. And that's kind of just how things work. Vowels and consonants shift and change. The way sentence structures ebb and flow. Language will never be able to be 100% maintained, even at the very source, because things are always changing.
And even when people try
that's just a fun fact.
Even when people try to keep it the same, they will focus on some very specific things, but most people don't realize the breadth of the language that they're using and are not actually noticing a lot of the ways that they're expressing themselves when it comes to the actual sounds and things. So even if they try to maintain something, it will probably be a relatively arbitrary thing compared to the entire language as a whole.
Yeah, like if we were talking about French for a little bit, their preservation efforts have been really pretty good. They're not bad. They're not bad. They do have a separate word for cell phone, but you bet your ass that all of like the French Parisian people say just cell instead of the longer word for cell phone, because you can't enforce society, unfortunately. When it comes to language, it'll always change. But I just kind of wanted to like toss that out there of like,
It's a good snippet.
You know, language dynamics are always shifting.
Oh yeah,
and
man.
changing.
Nobody says gnarly anymore.
I do.
I was gonna say, I swear you have said it to
But
me.
come
a number
step in
of
our
times
studio, and it's
recently.
like stepping right back into 1987.
Freaking radical,
I
man.
know, bro.
Yeah. That's the great tragedy of modern life, in Azul's view. It's the decline of the
Absolutely.
word
gnarly. It is a good
Yes.
word. It's one of those words that sounds like
It's
how
tubular.
it is, and I appreciate words
Whoa,
like that.
bro.
Yep.
Don't get too blue.
Cowabunga. Anyway, Vadal, any last thoughts or anything you want to do before we wrap up here?
Yeah, well, just appealing to the linguist side of you both. I have a usage guide. It's Brian Garner's American Usage Guide, something. But every now and again, I find myself just going to look up a word for something, and I always get lost in it for at least a page. It's really interesting to read what this word used to be used for, how it used to be pronounced, or this word used to be conjugated in a certain way and now it doesn't. And yeah, it's interesting to think, oh, all this stuff that I take for granted is simply the way that things are is a constantly fluid thing underneath me that I can't really pin down.
Yeah.
And even the usage guide, I think this is like version 3 or something in 4 years, you know, so he has to keep constantly updating it. But Yeah, it's one of those things you wouldn't think would be as neat as actually it is.
Yeah. No, that's what I love about language, is that it's always changing and it's always different. All the time. Every single moment of language is completely unique.
I do have one last thoughts question for both of you. Where do you stand on the word?
Oh yes. And as is there a Portuguese
I'll let
equivalent?
EJ go first.
Vocês.
Use guys.
I love it. I use the word y'all sometimes. I think it's fantastic. We actually have an entire episode of our podcast where we talk about dialects. And it's an interesting thing because usually when people are like speaking in a derogatory way about another dialect, it's unfortunate because it comes down to discrimination of a kind, of like who decided that this dialect of a language was superior to another. Just because, you speak a certain dialect of English doesn't actually mean that other dialects are less valid. And yet we have, obviously textbooks and dictionaries that all have chosen a dialect as the standard. But why is that the standard? And why are we judging other people for the way they speak? And so that's kind of what I would comment on that.
Nice.
Yeah. I love everything that EJ said. They nailed it. And yeah, if you want to go back to our dialects and accents podcast, we definitely kind of dive into that a little bit more. If you're curious.
Where do you stand, Evan? I think that's the real question here.
Yeah.
I think asking that question might have been a little telling.
He's a convert.
No, I'm a convert.
Yeah?
I grew up being very grammar Nazi-ish, very anal retentive about language. And then as you get older, you do hear the word dialect and you learn, oh wait, there are different dialects of American English all around the country and in different communities. And like you said, the kind of standard white academic English is not necessarily the correct one. And it was just slow glacial
As
drift.
it should be.
He learns he's not wrong.
Y'all
He's just
is
different.
meant to be slow.
Relax.
It's brought me around to I think y'all is the greatest thing America has to offer.
Have
the
you gotten to
English-speaking
all
world.
y'all yet, though?
Yeah.
No,
Yep.
I don't want to be a poser. I don't want to sound desperate, and I worry that I'm already desperate. Everybody, people who come from that come from a place that genuinely uses y'all will hear me say it. I'll be like, hey, do y'all want to go get some lunch? And they'll be like, look at this poor bastard. He just wants to belong. He can't pull it off. So all y'all is it's a ways off in the future for me, I think.
Fair enough.
I've got one more question, and not to be outdone, I've got a last question for you, Evan. But I'm rereading the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi, and it was like reinterpreted. And there's a big foreword in the beginning from the current author, who's like a karate kendo master as well. And there's a big section.
Wait, do you want to just give a brief case? Do you just want to give a brief explanation of what that
Miyamoto
book
Musashi is like this famous swordsman. It's contested if he was actually as good as he says he was, but
The Musashi?
the Musashi,
The Ronin Musashi?
Miyamoto Musashi, the first Ronin, maybe not the first. But he won like 63 duels in his life, and back then they were basically duels to the death. But he wrote this Book of Five Rings, which is like his tenets of swordsmanship and how he applies them to be like a master of everything in the world. It's like the first, I don't know, it's the Japanese self-help book, yeah. But there's a section in the beginning about how language in general in teaching martial arts is an imperfect medium because there's so much like impulse and lack of thought, like in the sense that it's not a logical process of how like a martial art is taught or learned. So the using of language as it breaks down some of the actual meanings behind it, both in like lost in history, but then also lost through kind of the process of, transferring some kind of visceral knowledge from one person to the other. And I'm wondering if you guys had any thoughts on that or experiences in capoeira with like learning. And I was initially like kind of thinking like how you say like foi to like, demonstrate how you're going to throw a specific movement at your partner or something. But there's so much more that kind of goes into that with that transaction in like the body language. Or did I lose you guys?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. I follow what you're saying, and I love that thought about that concept of martial arts being a very, very physical thing, but language being kind of an intellectual thing, and there are some elements that can't quite overlap. And while neurologically speaking, that is not entirely correct, because a good chunk of the linguistic process is automatic and visceral, just like martial arts are kind
Musashi?
of automatic and visceral.
Do you understand?
This is the editor. This is the interpreter and editor of Musashi. Okay.
I'm sorry. Continue.
It's okay. So while neurologically that is the case of like what is happening in your brain, there's definitely more to be said, and I think that the point is valid of language and thought being interconnected. And I personally, as a capoeirista, have maybe tripped up a little bit and gotten into my head a little bit when I should have just kind of let my body flow. And maybe language does hold people back from that sometimes in like the communication of how a movement should work.
Okay.
I know that I'm kind of difficult. I have a difficult time learning when someone's like explaining it to me, but if they show it to me and I can see it, then I can kind of work it out a little bit better. So that kind of goes into more of the philosophy of language and how language and thought are connected, which EJ and I actually just had a really interesting episode come out about
nice.
that. About inner dialogues and stuff. Or is that getting published some other time? I forget.
It
Anyway, by the time this episode comes out, it'll be there. But there is very much a philosophy of thought, and a philosophy of like how language is connected to the body and the subconscious mind. So there's a lot that goes into that too. So I really appreciate you kind of calling that out, because that is something worth investigating, and it is something worth thinking about in your martial arts practice of, are you maybe getting caught up in some of like the jargon or the nitpicky parts and forgetting that your body can just do it? Like your body can just kind of move as it needs to.
Yeah, I would also say, I think that kind of question goes back to the idea for me of speaking or writing about an experience is never going to be the same as having that experience. So we can talk about language, we can talk about capoeira a ton, but if you want to truly understand capoeira, you have to play
You
capoeira.
have to do it.
And so
I am so pumped to train right now. Do you want to go do it?
Oh, man.
You guys are pumping me up over here.
Let's go, guys!
Right? But yeah, I mean, there's always going to be a little bit of a gap between describing something and actually doing it. And like when I think about being in the zone, when I am in the zone and like truly, whether it's like solving a problem for my work or playing a sport, the analytical going through the steps in my mind and like thinking through the words kind of ceases, and you do just do it and separate it from that language. So I can really relate to that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you. I'll definitely listen to your podcast coming out about that, but thanks for answering. That was really interesting.
Yeah.
Y'all are
There's a lot about
fantastic.
language and philosophy that we could do a whole million episodes on, but you know.
Well, maybe a future collaboration.
Yeah.
See.
Yeah.
There you go. There you go. You guys came up with such great questions. Thank you so much for having us here. This has been an absolute joy.
Bodacious podcast for sure.
Yeah, thank you both
I
for
will.
being here.
I think I speak
making
for Azul
time
when I
for
say
it.
I think it was pretty gnarly. was
Yeah.
extremely gnarly.
Absolutely.
I also
10 for
think
10,
it was
bro.
gnarly.
Indeed.
The stokage is real.
Very gnarly, my
The
guys.
stokage. No, it was awesome. I cannot wait to see you soon, Stacy, in January.
Yes.
We'll be in LA. If you guys want to come up to our joint event in the Springs last weekend of February, in fact, anybody listening to this podcast, go ahead and register. Come on out. Kick some butt in Colorado Springs. Last weekend of February, we have an event going on.
That's right. We'll put a link in the description.
Awesome.
Well, if you have questions about capoeira or the word y'all, you can find us at onlythestrongestpodcast@gmail. If you'd like to get in touch with Stacy and EJ for the love of language, you guys are in places on the
We
internet?
are in places on the internet. You can hit us up mostly through Instagram at For the Love of Language. You'll see us right there with our beautiful blue and pink logo, and you can send us a message, give us feedback, ask questions, and we'd be happy to engage with you.
Awesome. Sweet. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for having us.
thank you. We'll talk to everyone next time. Ciao.
Ciao.